Hi everyone, here we are again. Thanks very much for making time to have a chat with me. And for those who are watching this video for the first time, this is the third installment of a series of videos that we've been producing for the strategic program around how the accelerated cluster development program is panning out in the real world. So I'm joined today by Eilir and Annabelle, who you will know by now as cluster leads from the north and up in Monmouthshire, which is really great, and as well as Sue from Cardiff. So welcome all. I suppose today is a slightly different format. In past conversations, we've talked about how the Accelerated Cluster Development Programme has been progressing through the transition year and some of the questions that have been asked of both the health boards and the cluster leads over the last 6 months in terms of changes that need to be made. And usually this video accompanies the National Primary Care Board paper, and this month is no exception. I suppose what has shifted a little bit is that our focus in the Primary Care Board paper this month is on a short survey that was issued by the All Wales Cluster Lead Group just a week ago, asking some key questions around accelerated cluster development in terms of how it's being experienced by cluster leads, but also importantly, how the current state of GMS is both being impacted by ACD and the potential impact of ACD on GMS. So I think today is going to be a slightly different focus than the last two conversations, and still I'm sure there's going to be some really good content for those who are watching today. So I suppose there are a number of themes in the survey. And there's two key areas that I think we could cover today in our conversation. One is around the capacity and capability of cluster leads to do their new role, but also new roles. So there's collaborative leads and cluster leads, and also the question around the support structure that sits around clusters and collaboratives to do the good work that they need to do. And clearly from the survey, there are a range of experiences around that theme. So it'd be good to hear from you all around how you're experiencing that. And the second theme that would be good to touch on is the GMS question. The impact that clusters have had on GMS sustainability to date, and your view around what that picture looks like going forward. And in terms of your ability to be able to engage with ACD, and also what ACD might mean for GMS sustainability. So that was a bit of a mouthful to start off with, but I think we should have some good chats around that today. And thanks very much for making time out of your very busy schedule. So I think I'll come to Eilir first up in Dwyfor to kick us off. Croeso, Eilir.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for the opportunity once more. Yeah, I think as you say, there's two elements that we need to discuss, which I think one is the broad discussion about how the ACD is going to have an effect potentially on, positive or negatively on GP sustainability, given the original purpose of clusters, or one of the core purposes of the cluster was to help support GP practices in Wales. And I think there's over time, with the evolving picture becoming clearer of what ACDs will be and what they'll become, there's a growing concern, I suppose, in the current group of GP practices, GP cluster leads, as to where does that then leave the ACD, the cluster, in terms of its function of providing sustainability to practices in Wales. And I think it does vary from cluster to cluster, from area to area. So I think if I'm in North Wales, and I think particularly in Northwest Wales, the four clusters there that I tend to work closely with, we've tended to use the cluster funds to try new things, to work in tandem with the practices, so that we didn't have to hang our sustainability hat on that hook of being dependent on the funds to function. Whereas I think in other areas, particularly in North East Wales, where perhaps that's been more the case, and I understand from colleagues elsewhere in Wales that's been the norm for them. And I think that's a serious consideration that needs to be taken at this point before we embark on huge changes that may well put the sustainability of practices in danger, given the current economic climate that we're in at the moment.
Thanks, Eilir. Annabelle?
Yeah, I feel similar, really. At the moment, it is very difficult to look at anything for me in South Bromwich other than GMS sustainability. And actually, beyond that, pharmacy, community pharmacy sustainability is a major issue now as well. I think we can find solutions collectively for that. And I think that that's something actually we did before accelerated cluster development and we'll do again. But I'm really conscious in this role that my main focus must be on that. It's no good if I advance accelerated cluster development, but then have no GMS in the area and no pharmacy in the area. That if we're looking at sort of population needs assessments and all the rest of it, I think that's possibly the most sort of basic need in terms of health, that they've got access to healthcare, and that is my concern. That if accelerated cluster development becomes bigger and more peripheral, and it takes time out to try and meet requirements with that, we may take our eye off the ball of keeping things going here. And I am concerned. I'm concerned about how aware people are centrally, maybe, of how difficult it is becoming to be a GP or a GP partner, or one of the allied health roles that works with them, and arguably in community pharmacy as well. It's every day is a real struggle now, and these are a mobile workforce that can make decisions to go elsewhere, and the implications from the area as a result. I think more than anything that needs to be the focus this year and next year. And I agree entirely that we do need to look at sort of startups implementing, whether it's implementing software that might help, implementing or trialing out new roles to see what will help. That's where I feel it should be at. And I worry that loss of time and effort might end up going around this, looking at sort of more peripheral parts of this, and not centering on the real core function, which is probably most needed for me, at least in my area, than it's ever been. It's a real worry for me at the moment, and I think that's where all my focus should be on right now.
And Sue?
Well, the good news is that Cardiff and Vale have committed to re-employing cluster development managers. We've lost them for about 18 months, so support has been patchy. Some clusters have got full-time PSOs. Unfortunately, in my cluster in the Mess, we haven't been able to recruit. So the good news is, going forward, we will have support. At the moment, I have nothing. So it's a big commitment, and you do feel you're being pulled into jobs that really it's not appropriate for you at your level of work. You want to be concentrating on projects and moving forward, but sometimes you end up sorting out diaries. But on the positive, we're going to have a CDM, and we'll go back out and try and get a PSO. But it's crucial to your work that you can concentrate on the key projects and get guidance from people who've done these projects before and can help you, so that the whole process is slick. It doesn't feel slick at the moment. It feels a bit bogged down.
And in terms of the cluster and collaborative distinction, how is that emerging in your patch in terms of individuals? Are you having, for example, is the GP collaborative lead also, the cluster lead at the moment? How is that?
At the moment, we don't have a GP collaborative lead. We have asked for expressions of interest, and we're working through how it's going to come forward. I suppose the crucial question is, should no one come forward, how will the voice of GMS be heard on the cluster group? They're really important. Some people would say they're even key to the cluster, because everything goes through GMS. So we've got a gap at the moment, but I'm confident that when we work together, we will resolve this.
it's quite powerful to hear you all talk like this. And I know in the last All Wales Cluster Lead group, certainly this feeling was shared really clearly, and I was very moved by it, but also quite worried, and turning my own thoughts to, so what actions can we take to really focus our energies on the most important thing, because it feels like there's lots of things we could be doing, but what is the most important thing that we should all be focusing on? And that's certainly something that I think a lot about, and how we can play a part in that. So given that context and the precious resources that we're working with, the other theme was around capacity and capability. So the transition into cluster and collaborative, and this question around the support network. So I know certainly some health boards have invested some of the money available from the strategic program fund to set up some support. I know that's not the same across Wales. So it'd be good to hear again, just another round, just from, Eilir, can you talk to us a little bit about that theme?
I think when talking with other cluster leads, I think that obviously the arrangements, the working arrangements, talking about the practicalities of your employment as being a cluster lead does vary across Wales, and we totally understand that. But with this new change, there needs to be I think an acknowledgement throughout that this means potentially a greater demand on your time, and therefore we need to define what that demand is going to be like. And there are going to be some cluster leads that will just want to carry on as being effectively GP collaborative lead, and others are going to be far more interested in the broader agenda of the cluster, and others would want to do both roles. The sense I'm getting at the moment is that there's this expectation that you take on both roles, which may well be okay for maybe the majority of cluster leads, but it's not the case for all. And I think we need to have a much sort of honest discussion and clear definitions provided, so that people can make an informed decision as to what they feel they can engage with, and what sort of new roles they can take on board. And I think we need to know exactly what sort of support is going to be there for the cluster leads. So we've been very fortunate where I'm based. We've had a very strong administrative team. But that team potentially is going to be stretched hugely now with establishing various other collaboratives, and they need that extra administrative support. My understanding is that there is extra support going to be made in terms of secondments, but those adverts haven't even gone out yet. So we're talking weeks and months away, and yet there's this sense of pressure that we need to get established as soon as possible. And if you haven't got collaborative leads in post, then you do sense, well, what's the point really of starting a meeting where maybe there's just the two of you there to discuss a really broad agenda, and you really need those input from those collaborative leads. So I think a pinch of realization needs to be sort of thrown into the mix, so that people understand actually where we really are. The vision, we get it. I mean, I've had a good discussion since we last met with people from Welsh Government, and I agree with the vision. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just how we implement and how we get it through as swiftly as possible, really, with the support, and that we don't risk losing engagement of really experienced and passionate people.
Thanks, Eilir. Annabelle?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big advocate from the start of the principles of accelerated cluster development. I felt that there needs to be more agility and more sort of ability for at cluster levels to determine what we were going to do and what we needed to do. And I've always interpreted cluster as wider. Anyway, we've always been in Narren Bevan, we've always had pharmacy representative, Holtam, that kind of thing. So I was okay with that, and I was happy to have more autonomy. But that just doesn't seem to be happening. I could really do with as much agility as possible now, and to work as closely as I can with my local council, and also the third sector, Gavo, etc. But it still feels very, very restricted. I would say that Narren Bevan have invested. There is a team there, and I've met one of the two of the team members now, which has been good. I don't know, like there's a data analyst, project manager, etc. centrally. It would be great if they could be working directly with me, rather than, I think, more on a central projects. And that's, I think it's, I guess if I will always say the same thing, because I guess we all have our different kind of beliefs and solutions, but I always believe in local solutions. I think once you centralise things, it can be really difficult. The solutions for Newport even are going to be different from South Monmouthshire, and they're going to be different again, you know, for Caerphilly. And that's just different areas, different kind of rurality, that kind of thing as well. And the same, completely different probably between North Wales and South, but I would back the cluster. I think the cluster needs as much backing as possible to be able to just get on with it and get things done. And I think the more bureaucracy and complexity we introduce inadvertently, the more difficult it can be to have the agility to quickly identify a problem and then look to rectify it. And I think that was where we started from. I think we highlighted problems with recruiting people and how long it takes. Problems with very short-term funding combined with long time to recruit means that it's very difficult to do things with it. I don't know we've resolved these things yet, and that is my concern, and that was my hope. So yeah, that is where I sit at the moment. I feel like the principles remain good, but I feel that we collectively maybe or centrally have become very bureaucratic. You know, I don't know how much it's costing for each of these areas to build up these big teams, but we could really, really do with some of that budget coming directly to clusters, and so that we can spend it on what we need to do to keep the health service, the primary care health service, and I'm including all the different, optometry, pharmacy, local charities, Mind, that kind of thing. Whatever we need to do to build up the area and keep it sustainable, I'm up for that. I'm just worried that this funding doesn't seem to be coming to a local level. It seems to be centrally held within the house boards, and so it's my desperate request that consideration is given that the clusters, within reason, I'm happy for scrutiny, but can have access to this. And access to the roles that are recruited directly, working directly within the cluster, rather than on a central basis.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. And before we come to Sue, I'd also just want to reflect that in the paper, we have previously talked about 4 priorities for the All Wales Cluster Lead Group, and one of those was around a support hub or hubs. And there's been some discussion, and we've repositioned that in the latest paper because, and I know, Annabelle, you've talked about this a lot, is that you don't really mind where that support comes from and what form and in what form it is, as long as it meets local need. And so I think the idea of an independent support hub perhaps hasn't garnered that much support, but I think what is still absolutely clear is that the clusters need support, and those functions that we set out right in the beginning are still valid. Project management, business management, informatics, administration, all of that stuff. But there were some concepts around them being focused on the cluster, working directly with the cluster, and that agility and that almost that protection, that was your dedicated resource that you could rely on to be there for you. So I think it is a central focus that has been a theme all the way through our work together, and is kind of coming to a head now, I think, as ACD develops. Just over to Sue next. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, as you say, reflecting back on how the cluster has impacted on the practices, the big investment in our funds has always been on cluster pharmacists, bringing them in, them taking on big projects that affect the whole of the cluster, and also individual projects to move the practices forward. That's taken up a lot of the budget and has made a big impact for them. The other smaller element of the budget then has been looking at projects around childhood IMS, and we're looking at dementia-friendly practices. Is there any wins we can make there to improve things for our high elderly population? So it's had a big impact, but I worry that the part that I get the most from is when we have a conversation with a community pharmacy rep, and he brings his issues that we can help with. We bounce off each other. We feedback the problems, and that we're talking about the Green Inhaler project, for example, and they're willing and happy to get involved. And are we going to lose that because only one GP going forward will have that conversation instead of all the practice GPs and all the practice managers? So it almost feels like ACD, instead of bringing the professional collaboratives together, are moving them away into their own separate group on a different level. And so that's a worry for me, that we're not actually moving in the right direction with it. And then if we don't have that direct contact, will we lose the connections?
Interesting. And I know there's a question in the survey which touches on, you know, there's a challenge around trying to engage your constituent practices and colleagues into cluster working. How do you see that changing as ACD develops?
Well, like my other colleagues, you know, I have a big worry about it. We've asked for sort of expressions of interest for who would like to come forward with the lead, and you know, the comments are coming back. We're inundated. We're really under pressure. To ask us to come forward for this at this time is a real problem for us. So we don't feel. I don't feel we're going forward. We're getting stuck. But to be fair, I would like to comment that Cardiff and Vale Health Board have really engaged with this process. I don't see how they could have done much more. We've had meetings, we've had brainstorming sessions. We really have worked to move this forward. But you do wonder whether this is is this the right time when everyone is under so much pressure to bring in such a big change? But then when is a good time?
So yeah, so thanks so much to all of you for spending time with us again. I think, you know, as this program develops, the devil is always in the details, isn't it? And it is a transition year that's been accepted. This is how we learn to do this stuff together, and I'm just so grateful for your time and your honesty for sharing how it is with you, because I think it's an opportunity to shine a light on what's happening in the real world at practice level in primary care, and I hope that we've done that in today's session. So thank you very much, and have a great day.